Sí, sí, algo, por favor. Algo.
And it's the same with sexual politics. What I thought was interesting in the film, you know, with those coffee commercials, it's man versus woman, but then you have this lookalike, Ron Burrage, the protagonist of the film. He's sort of, by his very nature, he's gay, he lives with this other lookalike, a Rembrandt lookalike, but by his very nature he subverts what Hitchcock was all about, because it's such an obsession with the Hitchcock blonde. But because the Hitchcock blonde doesn't want to abide with the male desire, and you see like films with Vertigo, it's sort of male hysteria, because it's not the woman being doubled, because the woman is able to play on that masquerade, and she can be blonde, she can be brunette, she can be black. The woman is very smart because she can play all those figures, but the male is stupid because he says, oh, the woman has to be as I tell the woman has to be, but the woman refuses that desire, and sort of the male is split and it becomes male hysteria. And you see all these guys in the film like Khrushchev and Kennedy and Nixon, they all talk about their bombs and about their rockets, and they keep going and talking about their rockets and their television and world politics, but it's sort of male hysteria that splits itself because they're not in line with their own desire, which is sort of the micropolitics in the kitchen where the man is upset with the woman who can't make coffee, and it's totally a fiction. And sort of that sexual politics that are propagated through television but also through Hollywood films is sort of very interesting, but Hitchcock was aware of that. And sort of when he plays on the idea of the double, or there is one moment in North by Northwest when he measures on the wigs, or when in Norman Bates in Psycho when he measures on the wigs, it's sort of the repressed idea of the mother, and it's sort of that mother, it's the mother always that comes back to haunt sort of those male figures in Hitchcock films, and it's sort of the strong woman, but the woman is strong, and because she's strong, Hitchcock wants to kill her. Because that's what it's all about, is a woman that's too strong, we have to kill her. And that's where it's the female sexuality in those films, like in The Birds. It's sort of, the birds come back to haunt that village because it's the repressed sexual politics. And it's sort of, you know, I think it's the same thing. It's not, you know, when the propagation of the culture of fear with the whole war propaganda in the 60s between East and West was also fiction, but it becomes a reality. Weapons of Mass Destruction is a fiction. It's a fiction, but it becomes a reality at the point, you know, 1 million people are being killed because of a fiction. And it's the same on a small level with sexual politics, is the same in the kitchen. And then the man blames the woman who can't make coffee. It's sort of ridiculous. And that's, I sort of love to interrupt the film with those 5 commercials, because at one point, because with Hitchcock the coffee is never a coffee, it's the poison coffee. And it's in Notorious when, you know, the woman's sort of trapped in that whole story about, you know, the Nazis in Notorious, and it's sort of, you know, it's again, the man has to save her from that poison coffee. But what I thought was sort of funny when Hitchcock is meeting Hitchcock in sort of that conversation, it's sort of, maybe it's also questioning my own identity, I don't know, but it's sort of, it's through the coffee commercial that becomes the poisonous weapon. It's the commercial becomes the poison, and that's what sort of Double Take is about.
And I think Hitchcock is your ideal vehicle for your
yes.
film, because he was a filmmaker and he was on television. And
exactly.
Very intelligent decision, I think.
And also he was so upset because storytelling changed in the television climate, and the commercial changed the way we tell stories. And I thought that was also interesting, but also then finding in London a figure who has sort of took Hitchcock as a Hollywood icon to construct a life, but by his very nature contradicts that Hollywood icon through the vehicle of Ron Burrage, who sort of is the contemporary version. It's the YouTube culture, which is the imitation culture today. We all live in that sort of where we adopt mainstream media and commercials to tell our own identity. But, you know, it's not because we imitate it that we cannot joke about it. And the joke is actually the way we construct through mainstream culture our own identity. And of course we can fake being sort of part of that mainstream culture to the commercial that is being propagated. But still, as you know, for me, I think for me it's the position of the joker. Even as Belgium is a small country and you're jammed between those big political, economic cultures, as the joker you can tell that the emperor has not any clothes on. That actually, oh look at this is just a fake game. It's a game of fear, and it's just because they want to control you. But I don't want to be controlled. I want to tell my own story.
¿En qué estás trabajando ahora? What are you making
right now?
Yes.
I'm actually making another film. It's a more a fiction film, but it's about the history of happy endings, and it's very similar. But it's actually a story about a little girl who collects toothpaste caps. The toothpaste commercial is called Smile. And if you click SMILE, the 5 letters, you can go to the supermarket and ask for a happy ending. And sort of, it's the whole consumer idea of happy ending. And it's sort of course, it's a fiction story, but it's sort of to talk about happy ending in a way that it has all become consumption. And it's sort of a personal story, but at the same time.
Where?
I don't know yet. It's still being written, so it's in production. And another one is a story about a professor who tells his life, but it's sort of within a Belgian writer, and I talk about the colonial history of Belgium with Congo, and it's sort of set in the 60s. But again, Congo was sort of with the CIA and Mobutu and Lumumba, and it's also the same period with Khrushchev and Kennedy and Khrushchev and Eisenhower and Nixon. Is sort of, you know, when Khrushchev came to talk in the United Nations in New York, he was so upset because the CIA was directly involved killing Lumumba and putting Mobutu in power because of the whole. It's actually what was important in Congo was the uranium they found, and the uranium was important for the nuclear arms race. And sort of you see that the whole political game of colonial Belgian history is written into East and West and Khrushchev, but it's a professor living today telling a story of sort of how he grew up, and it's a very story of today, but in the world we live today.
Something like you?
I don't know, maybe. There's always something autobiographical in the films, yeah.
Yes. ¿Algo más?
Ay, tantas cosas, ya no tenemos tiempo, pero sí, todavía.
Thank you.
Yes? Alright, thank you.
Yes?
Alright.
Gracias.
So this afternoon I'll go to Cholula and visit the container village.
Yes,
¿Cómo no?
Yeah? I heard it's very cool. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Alright.
Thank
Alright.
you.
Sí, gracias.
Bueno, ¿está la secretaria?
Mucho.